I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Rebel's Edge. You're going to be excited about what we've got in front of us today. We've got a 10X. You know what? That X, it's U.S. Steel. We're 10X in this son of a gun because the calls that were bought, wow, these things are exploding today. We're going to cover that next. And welcome to the Rebel's Edge. We've got my man Marc LoPresti with us today. You know what? Marc's going to be here all week. There's going to be John one day, me not around for a while, and all that kind of thing. You get to see the handsome Marc LoPresti, who always comes with this A game for us. Marc, how you doing today?
Doing great, Pete. Back by popular demand. Looking forward. This is sort of like sweeps week, as I think I said to you over the weekend. It's the end of the year. We got to get the ratings up. So what do you and John do? You bring out the big guns, the big guy, me, to wow the audience. So let's get at it and do it.
The good-looking guy, too. I will say that. Gosh, look at that handsome son of a gun. All right, let's just jump right into this whole thing. I want to hit something on the macro minute right out of the gate, Marc. Crude. The movements that we have been seeing in crude oil have been absolutely extraordinary, something like we've never seen in the past, the ups, the downs, and everything. Just one example for you. Wednesday of last week, crude oil, $68. You know where it was today? We got well over 74. Now we're easing back a little bit. But the kind of movements we're seeing right now in the commodity space is absolutely outrageous. What do you got, Marc?
Yeah, and that's consistent, I think, with what we've been telling folks for a while now. Expect continued volatility in oil, in particular commodities. The end of a rate hike cycle, commodities do a lot of funky things. They tend to go north. I got mortgage rates, Pete, in my macro minute. They've fallen from 8% in October to 7% last week. It's a story you and I covered a week ago. We're going to start to see the impact of anticipated rate cuts on the horizon, bringing those mortgage rates down. Still not enough, I think, to impact existing home sales. We're going to get those numbers on Friday. Lots of housing data this week. Housing starts coming out tomorrow, existing home sales Wednesday, and new home sales Friday. We'll see how that all plays out with those mortgage numbers.
Another monster week of data. How about the fantastic futures? What about those, Marc?
Fantastic futures.
And there they are. We love that. That's our man, Jared. I'm going to give you sugar. I brought this up in the past. I'm bringing it up again. A month ago, sugar was sitting right around $28. Now, with high volume, all the way down to 21. The year-to-date low is 19. This is something that I think we all should be pretty happy about because we talk about inflation, we talk about a lot of different things. Sugar is in a far more diverse world than all of us ever really recognize. So put your arms around this. This is a good thing right now for all of us. Well, maybe, at least a little.
Well, I use Splenda, or if Splenda's not available, sweet and low in my coffee, trying to avoid the sugar. But listen, I'm looking at my fantastic futures today. I'm looking at that 10-year. It's at 3.92. Pete, just 2 short months ago, it was at a 5 handle. That is a pretty dramatic difference in the 10-year. It is not a huge surprise given monetary policy, given how we're going into the end of the year with the Santa Claus rally that's on a 7-week streak, including through today. That's what I had in fantastic futures.
All right, we're going to jump right into it, man, because I'm so excited about what's going on. You talk about 10Xing something. How about just using the letter X? That's what U.S. Steel is. Well, this stock absolutely ripping to the upside, Marc. We had a 27% move to the upside. It's a stock that we all know has been looked at as undervalued. What do they really want to pay for it, right? I mean, there was a lot of guesses out there, a lot of different companies out there trying to take a look at this thing, but I don't think anybody saw what Japan was looking at. Japan's Nippon Steel. How about the fact that these guys said, you know what, we like what we see, $55 a share. We're just going to go all in at $15 billion. Now, if you go back to August and you see where the stock was trading, you know how outrageous that number is, relatively speaking. And that's where we had so many other bidders taking a look and, kind of kicking the tires. This is amazing. And oh, by the way, this was no shock to us. Why do I say that? Well, the unusual options out there were absolutely extraordinary. You could see it on the screen there, but they're buying December calls. Now they're going all the way out to December 22nd. So in other words, these still work. These are still in play. The 39 calls. They bought 5,000 of those on Friday. Stock was at 39. Give you an idea, stock is well over 49 now. trading closer to 50. So pretty outrageous, Mark. I'll tell you what, I will give you this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different trades in the stock at 35 to 37. January 36 calls stand out the most. That was at the end of November. They were $1.40. They bought 7,500 of those. You know where they are today? $14.
Wow.
I'd say these people are doing pretty well. When I say 10x, this is 10x and then some in some cases. Unbelievable moves to the upside. What do you think?
Yeah, well, listen, congratulations to all of our unusual option activity subscribers. If this is not a reason to jump in on this and get this subscription, smash that subscribe button on the Market Rebellion website. I don't know what is. I think this is also good news on a few other fronts, Pete. It's good news for what's anticipated to be decent M&A activity going into 2024. It's obviously a bullish bet on industrial manufacturing activity globally. You don't buy a steel company, much less U.S. Steel, much less at the kind of 40% plus premium that's on this particular transaction. If you think economic growth is slowing, if you think industrial manufacturing activity is going to contract in 2024, this is a really bullish bet that 2024 is going to be a good year in terms of overall economic conditions. And congratulations to everyone that has that UOA subscription and got in on those trades. We love those 10x handles on that kind of thing. So fantastic.
It's why we're here. It's what makes us excited every day. We talk about the leverage. We talk about options. We talk about the risk rewards and so forth and all that type of thing. But yeah, it's pretty nice to see this actually occur, Mark. And it wasn't some super surprise. I think surprise really is the levels at which they went to. That was definitely surprising. But how aggressive this became in terms of who was going to buy it and for what level. Absolutely incredible. Next up, we've got NIO. Now, for those who don't know that name very well, it's an EV maker, and everybody has been very excited about what these guys have been doing. But the problem is, when are they ever going to be profitable? Well, that is a bit of a problem. So the cash infusions that they have gotten, and they've gotten another one today, Abu Dhabi, and $2.2 billion, Mark. So they're giving them a little bit of room to try to make this company really work. Do you think it's going to work, number one? Or do you think this is money that's just getting thrown at something to see where they're going to go? It's an interesting question. And the reason I say it is I look at this company and they've had a really rough time. When you look at the 52-week, they're a lot closer to the lower end than the higher end. But today, getting a nice bump to the upside. They had more volume in the first hour today than they would in a normal entire day of volume. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, listen, these upstart EV manufacturers just eat cash. I mean, there is a long and windy road, if you'll excuse the terrible pun, of getting to profitability and competing. You've got the Rivians of the world, of course, everybody competing as well against Tesla. This is one that I have been on the fence about, Pete. This cash infusion definitely gives them a fighting chance. Will it be enough? I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. I don't own the stock, and I think it's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit too much of a dice roll. So I'm not in this one.
It's something I always bring up to John every single time we talk about specific stocks, Mark, and you're right. Cash burn is outrageous, but when are they going to make money? This is a publicly traded company. It's been around a long time. You've got to start showing us that you know how and have the ability to actually make money. And until that happens, I got a little less interest than apparently the folks from Abu Dhabi really have right now. All right, solar stocks. I'll tell you, SunPower, you go through this long list of all these solar stocks. They always have these high short interests, it seems, and that's something. They also seem to always have a cash burn that's extreme. Well, this is a stock that's getting beat up today. Now, they had a great run last week, a lot of excitement, a lot of that having to do with the Fed. But what do you think about this one, Mark? Because I look at this stock, I just get a little bit nervous about the idea of, okay, they get a few steps higher, but they just can't hold on. And the next thing you know, they start slamming it back down again. What do you think at this point?
Yeah, I mean, these are highly interest rate sensitive stocks. So I'm not surprised to see that pop on the dovish tone we got from Jay Powell last week. When you do these large scale solar projects, simply put, Pete, they're financed, right? So the lower and the better the rate you can get, the more likely these projects actually happen, right? Whereas developers will sit on the sidelines and wait for better interest rate situations to actually proceed. I heard that there is a pretty massive class action that was filed against them alleging accounting fraud. Man, that is never a good thing. You never want to hear, maybe we can't rely on our prior. Now, I haven't heard that yet, but certainly that's what these plaintiffs' lawyers are alleging, that there is some malarkey going on as it relates to their accounting practices, and maybe we can't rely on previous statements and previous filings. So I think this one's probably got even further to go to the downside, Pete.
Yeah, that's never a good thing. Even if it's just floated out there, it's just never a good thing. The reaction's almost always going to be exactly what we are seeing happening today in this stock, which is a pretty big push to the downside. Last I looked, I think it was down, 15, 20%, something like that. That's a pretty significant move. Next up, we've got a firm. And I know you love this pay now and pay later idea, right, Mark? I mean, why not? You can just stack it up and then never have to, you pay off a little bit here, a little bit there. It's an interesting concept. I just don't know how this whole thing really can play out in the right way, but it's showing right now that there are folks out there that are talking about, hey, look, it allows me to do this and this and this from a spending perspective. And, I'll just pay off a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. I don't know, Mark. What do you think? Because when I look at the company, the stock is actually reacting pretty nicely overall. The stock has been trading a lot closer to 52-week highs than the lows. Now, is that because there is this monster short interest and the environment we're in right now where short interest is high, squeezes are prevalent almost everywhere where you see this very high short interest? That's the point that I think is moving this stock the way it is. How about you? Is this something that you'd actually get a little interested in, or does it make you a little bit too nervous?
Well, listen, we've seen this BNPL, buy now, pay later sector from when it sort of exploded on the scene during COVID. Out of nowhere, companies like Affirm, another one, Klarna, I believe that was a company out of Sweden that at one point had a $64 billion valuation. It was one of the highest valuations ascribed to a private company at the time during 2021 and 2022. A lot of regulatory scrutiny around this, trying to understand what their lending practices are. But what was really interesting and why I remain interested in these companies is if executed properly, they actually will provide and can provide credit facilities in situations where there otherwise is not, and to folks that are underbanked and in some cases unbanked. That's a good thing. The other thing I like about them, they don't generally use just traditional credit scoring to determine whether or not to provide credit. They use all kinds of alternative data, of course, which we love, you all know that, to determine whether or not folks should actually be able to get that. These are often done at POS, at point of sale. So when you go to the register to buy something, you can be offered those BNPL, buy now, pay later programs. But if there's holes in the boat in terms of their underwriting, which is part of what the story on the street is, that people can game the system, that's not good. So watch this one carefully. I have been in and out of the stock. I'm not in the stock right now, but I do like the space in general, especially with folks running out of room on their credit card tabs. We have $1.3 trillion in credit card debt in this country, Pete. So people got to get credit from someplace else. They're going to turn to the Affirms of the world.
Yeah, it scares me enough that I'd use POS, but I'd probably have different words in that acronym. All right, next up, Mark. And everybody can figure that out however they want. But next up, we're going to hit a little bit of sports. We always like it. I know Mark actually likes to jump in there with some of the sports stuff too. Top 4 teams in the NFL, Mark. So we've been watching this thing play out all year, and a couple of teams have moved in, moved out, moved up, moved down. You've got Buffalo. You never really know, but they sure looked good this weekend. There's just a myriad of different ways to try to break it down and figure it out. Dallas, we can't figure them out. One week they look fantastic, unbeatable. The next week, not so good. Can't even score very many points. So my question to you is top 4. What would you say? I'll give you a real quickie for me, which is San Francisco. You've got Brock Purdy, you've got Christian McCaffrey, and you've got the best defense in football. I'd say that's a pretty good combination. Baltimore, you got Lamar Jackson, and you got a damn good defense, probably the second best in all of football. You got Miami. You've got nothing but offense. You have no defense at all. Your defense, you don't even care about your defense, but you've got Tua and you've got Tyreek Hill. That's a pretty daggone good offense that put 70 points on Denver early in the year. Philadelphia, you got Hurts, you got Swift, you got a defense that sometimes looks unbelievably good. But Mark, the last couple of games, they gave up 34 points to the Bills, 42 points to the Niners, 33 points to the Cowboys. So I don't know. There's a couple of teams in here who don't play great defense, Miami and Philadelphia. On the other hand, you look at San Francisco and Baltimore. It's why I keep saying I think those are your Super Bowl teams. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to disagree with you, and it's definitely been a bit of a heart-wrenching year for NFL fans with all of the injuries, quarterback injuries that we covered on the show. I think you and I last week, a lot of early ones, early points in the season. 56 or 57 the quarterback starts in the first 14 or 15 weeks of play. But I do think you've got the two NFL teams matched up correctly. And I think a lot of the teams that you just mentioned are also in the highlights for the MVP, which I think is what we're going to cover next. So those two lists overlap and correlate, as we'd say in the stock world, pretty highly.
They do indeed. So let's just jump right on to it. MVP. Who do you got? Now, Mark, the fun thing is I know that you probably have a different outlook, different way of looking at stuff. So maybe they're not the same. And that's totally fine. Everybody's got their opinions here. But you led me into it. You talk about all these quarterbacks that are kind of fill-in quarterbacks, right? I mean, whether it's the Minnesota Vikings, the Cleveland Browns, and Cincinnati Bengals, and they're finding some quarterbacks actually that are playing pretty damn good. In some cases, they might even be playing better than the starters, quite frankly, the number ones in a lot of cases. So Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, I don't know. Why is this guy not up for the MVP and having a big lead? Mark, here's some of the numbers on Brock. He's got 3,800 yards passing. That's a big number. He's got the highest yards per play when he's throwing the ball, nearly 10 yards per pass. He's got 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He's got the highest QBR, and all he does is get out there and give the balls to the right guys. And he doesn't have just one favorite, which is a problem, I think, with a lot of quarterbacks where here in Minnesota, you get the ball to JJ. You got to throw to JJ. It's the only guy you can throw to is JJ, Justin Jefferson. Great receiver, maybe the best in the game. That doesn't mean he should get every pass, but that's what people want. Meanwhile, Brock Purdy's like, you know what? I'm going to get it over to the tight end over here. I'm going to get it over to McCaffrey over here. I'm going to get it over to Debo over here. I'm going to give it to everybody on the field so nobody knows where I'm going to throw the ball. So I give Brock Purdy all the credit in the world. So for me, he'd be my number one. My number two is Christian McCaffrey. Same team. The guy can pass. He can catch. He can run. He can block. He can do returns. I mean, there is nothing the kid can't do, Mark, and that makes him just absolutely extraordinary to me. 1,300 yards rushing, leads the league. He's got 13 touchdowns. He's got 500 receiving, got another 7 touchdowns. And the guy goes out there and he'll put his body on the line to block for Brock Purdy to get him one more second. So those are my two, and I can give you a reason why I don't have Dak on my list in a minute. But what do you think right now?
Well, Purdy's been incredible to watch so far this season, Pete. I think is he like about to break a record for passing yards per attempt?
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken. I mean, which sort of makes sense when you talk about, what an integral role he has played in getting the ball to the right person at the right time, which he's shown extraordinary talent for. I got to disagree with you in terms of my number 2 pick, and I know you don't like him, and you're going to tell me why, but as you also know, we are Dallas fans as well as Jet fans here in this house. We are Dallas Cowboy fans, as mandated by my daughter. So I think the number 2 pick has got to be Dak Prescott. But tell me why I'm wrong.
So here's why you're wrong. When I look at Dak, I see him as a great quarterback this year. He has not been a great quarterback. He's suddenly very, very good. And I think that when you watch him, you're pretty impressed, right? But here's the problem. Here's just the list of games in November, December so far. They lost to Philly. They beat the Giants. Oh, they're pretty good, right? The Giants, yeah, they're terrible. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL. They beat Carolina. Carolina is the worst team in the NFL. They beat Washington, another team that's one of the worst in the entire NFL. By the way, all 3 of those head coaches are potentially going to get fired. We already know Carolina's already gone. But Washington, yes, Ron Rivera probably out. You look at the Giants, how patient can they be, right? I mean, they've got who they think they need, and they can't get it done. Last year they looked good. This year not so good. So they did beat a pretty decent Seattle team. Philly, but Philly had a bunch of turnovers in that game, which, the Dallas defense did that, but that wasn't Dak. So, I just can't, it's hard for me to give him too much credit. Then he goes and lays an egg up in Buffalo. I mean, honestly, he goes there, 0 touchdowns. He's got an interception. His QBR, that's the rating for quarterbacks, folks, 38. I mean, the MVP of the league, when you need to get it done so you can have home field playoff advantage and all the things that you want to get because you split with Philly already, and you go out there and you have a 38 QBR rating in the game. I don't know, man. So did I convince you or no? Because you might say, you know what, the hell with all that.
Listen, I don't think you can judge, and it's certainly a pretty diametrically opposed experiences over the weekend between Prescott and Purdy. And yeah, it was a very, very disappointing loss in Buffalo. But I don't think that you can judge it just based on one game, and I still think he's my number 2 pick.
That's not one game I gave you.
I was trying to deflect away from all the other brilliant things that you said about why I'm wrong. So I don't know if it was successful.
I love you to death, and I actually love Dak. I'm a guy who thought when Dak came out of college, Mississippi State, I mean, I know his whole story. When he came out of college, I was like, that guy was a great draft pick. That was the right guy to get for the Dallas Cowboys, everything else. I just look at it this year and think, gosh, suddenly they think he's made this total change, and I'm not sure it's happened that way because in the inferior competition, he's done great. But when he gets to the tougher side, and Philadelphia's defense is not tough this year, but he gets to the tougher side, it's been difficult. And so that's all I'm saying about Dak when I'd say that. Actually, my number 3 would be Deebo Samuel. By the way, plays for the 49ers. All right, great to see you, man. I think, Mark, it's always fun. I really appreciate you. Thank you also for filling in for me for the rest of the week because I've got a fun surprise in front of me from my wife, so I'm looking forward to that. But thanks for joining us today. Thanks to everybody else out there for joining us on the Rebel's Edge. See you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern.